you follow the other and focus. So I'm just saying that the writing, I mean, the writing every day is a luxury for some people, but I think you're in a position where you can write every day, not just your schoolwork, but writing so you can get your style.
Okay. All right. Well, everyone is on. Everyone has joined us today. I am so excited to have our two guest speakers. I am going to introduce our guest speakers and then we will go around, and it's an hour and 15 minutes.
Oh,
So
okay.
just
Okay,
take
that's
as
good
much
to know.
time as you need.
Okay. Okay, that's good to know.
Mhm.
So I did speak to the class last year. It was about on my memoir, Coming Full Circle from Jim Crow to Journalism. And I reached out to Mia to say, hey, I have another book. There were two books last year. Toward the end of the year, I collaborated with my good friend Tina McElroy Ansa. We were college roommates. And I always like to start at Spelman College in Atlanta. And I always like to start by just talking about how the book came about. Tina and I both were journalists. I went to Spelman knowing that I wanted to be a journalist, and I studied journalism. I had an internship like all of you. I hear all of you have had internships of one kind or another. I had a newspaper internship, copy editing internship. And Tina came to Spelman knowing she wanted to be a writer, but she wasn't quite sure what kind of writing. But we both ended up in journalism. And so we have that in common. She eventually veered into writing novels, and I stayed in journalism almost all of my career. I also, it wasn't mentioned in your introduction, but after I retired from the newspaper business, I came back to Savannah, where I grew up, as chair of the Department of Journalism and Mass Comm, and that's how we ended up in that program together at LSU. So I did that for 3 years until I re-retired and launched into my memoir. So one day in June, right after the death of George Floyd, Tina called me. We were talking on the phone quite frequently earlier this year about, a lot of things that were going on in the world and in our lives as well, our personal lives as well. And she just called and said, hey, how you doing? And I said, I'm not doing so well. I'm angry, I'm frustrated, I'm confused. I'm just not feeling good about what's going on with the protests were going on. Unfortunately, there were people were looting and, things that we thought, we weren't sure that was connected to the protests. And we were just feeling really frustrated and not really sure about what we could do to help in that regard. And also we had COVID, and so we weren't going out. And on top of that, we said, we're older folks now, so we're not feeling, let the young folks go out and do all that protest, and we didn't feel comfortable going out, especially because of COVID. And so Tina said, well, and then I said, I started to hear from some of my friends, many of them white, who were calling or emailing me and saying, oh my God, I had no idea that all this racism that you've been talking about all these years is that bad. They clearly just didn't quite get it until the death of George Floyd, when they could see a man with a knee on his neck for 8 minutes and 46 seconds died, and the life was sucked out of him. And Tina said some of her friends were saying the same thing. They didn't realize how bad it was. And so I'll let Tina pick it up from there about how this book, Meeting at the Table, African American Women Write on Race, Culture, and Community, came about.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Wanda. Wanda and I had worked a little bit together, although we were both journalists. I was journalist as well when we both came out of college. And we had never worked together before. We've known each other. She gave me parties when my books came out, all of that. We stayed in touch, and our families, got together, all of that. But when we talked on that day, I had never really heard Wanda sound like that. Wanda's my can-do friend. I just teased her and said, it's not even 12 o'clock. And I've had a Wanda Small Lloyd day already. I mean, I've been out, I've been to the grocery store, I had a meeting, I'm just doing, that's Wanda's life. And so we really wanted to do something. We were also really very affected by it. As Wanda said, you were just confused. And we were just talking and, talking about what we could do. And it was like in the old movies, when it came to somebody, well, hey, wait a minute. Let's put on a show. My dad's got a barn, I can sing, it's the old 40s movies. And that's how it was. I said, well, we should write something. And she said, yeah. I said, well, wait a minute. And it dawned on me. I said, wait, I have a publishing company. Wanda just published her memoir. Who I always say, my friend Wanda published 2 books in 1 year, and the year was 2020. Who does that? What kind of woman does that? Wanda is my really my black girl magic friend. But at any rate, so we got to get. We were talking about the book. I'm talking about what we could do, and we were talking about writing because that's what we do. And we had worked together a little bit on her book. I was her hype woman. I wrote the forward for it, and we found out we worked seamlessly together. And so I said, well, I have a publishing company, and Wanda was like, well, why don't we do a book? And I said, what kind of book? And she said, well, maybe essays. And I said, well, no, like essays. And that's what happened. On June 12th, we came up with this idea of what we could do. And ladies and gentlemen, the lesson for us is that we had agency. We forgot that we were sitting around, bemoaning stuff. We don't have to bemoan. We know what we do is get up and move, which is what Black Girl Magic is. And we just started talking by the time we hung up, we knew that we wanted essays. We knew that we wanted all African American women. We knew that we wanted a balance of writers and people who were not writers. It was just really wonderful, really heady kind of stuff saying, well, who do you want? And we just started thinking about the women whose voices we wanted. And we reached out, and surprisingly enough, everybody said that it was a good idea. Some folks, said that they couldn't do it because they just didn't have the time, but rah. Ava DuVernay said onward, so we got together, and that was June 12th. And we had meetings over the phone, and we reached out to people, and we got, these wonderful 15 essays. And we started on June 12th with this idea. And on October 16th, we had all 15 essays. They weren't all ready to go, but on October 16th, we had all 15 essays, which is extraordinary. I know, y'all in academia, how long it can take sometimes to get a collection of essays from people all over the country and in different areas of life. And so, but we had it, and by November 2nd, we were turning the book over to the printer to be printed. It was just amazing. And one thing is that this was an idea whose time had come. Number one, it was very much an idea that we were riding a wave of interest about this, of concern. And of course, things kept happening. And
that was actually one of the most important things about this book. And that was it needed to come out as quickly as possible, because people were really trying to learn about African Americans and Black culture, people who didn't fully understand what the contributions that women had made and the experiences that Black women make. And we wanted to share that experiences, not just with white readers, with all readers, with men as well, but particularly with a group of people that were really literally hungry for the information. What makes Black women tick? What makes family life tick? What is the culture of the Black community? There are people who would say, well, we didn't know that many Black people go to college, or that many Black professors, or that many Black professionals in medicine or the law, or whatever their area of expertise might be. We really wanted to educate people and share our experiences. We wanted to share the fact that our families do the same thing. We get up every day, and the most important thing is to educate our children and educate our community and serve our communities. And we wanted people to understand that Black women tick just like everybody else. But we may have different passions, but we tick. Yes,
what's interesting, Wanda, we had a really good balance. I always say, this is church and this is the steeple, how you were saying. And well, we're the church. I mean, she feels in all my slots, I feel in all of hers. Well, one of the things that we thought about when we talked about this is Wanda really was adamant about there being some way forward, that each of the essays, spoke to themselves, but then had some kind of instructional kind, so not to leave it on a high note, but to leave it on the note where people could actually learn things. So as always, Wanda and I were on different kind of sides of it. Wanda thought that most of our readers would be white people who were interested in just this. And I thought that there were just as many Black folks who really were interested in African American women and actually didn't know what was going on with them. So I think we reached a really broad audience, and that was our intention as well.
I wanted the essays to end in a prescriptive way. That is, if you're curious about how the culture of the African American community and what you can do to help after this whole wave of murders, not just George Floyd, but Ahmaud Arbery and Breonna Taylor and all the people who came before, who unfortunately died violently before them. I wanted our essays to be able to share some information like, well, how do you learn about Black culture? How do you get comfortable talking to Black people? How do you understand what we're talking about when we talk about Black History Month, or when we talk about the books that we read, or the music that we listen to, or the way we educate our families? And so we asked, and many of our writers did write just beautifully about, okay, now that we've told you a little bit about ourselves and our culture, here's how you can learn more about who we are.
Yeah.
So that we can interact and learn from each other.
Now, Wanda's essay, especially, is an example of that. Of some simple questions like, go to a church that you've never gone to. Because as you said, the questions and the remarks that we got is that, well, I didn't know if I was welcome. Is that the kind of thing that you do? What is an HBCU? I mean, there are all kinds of questions, because I think one of our stumbling blocks and our challenges in this country and where we are now is that we don't know each other. We don't know each other.
We're not having conversations also.
No, we're not talking, and we're not talking on a deeper level, on a level other than, what was on TV and what did the Kardashians do. That's really what, most people really talk about. And for us to all have a serious conversation, one of the things is we wanted is this book to be helpful in some way in starting those conversations and being comfortable about those conversations, or even being able to ask questions, about conversations. We had a reference to a camel toe in one of the essays. I think it's in mine. One of the other essays, somebody else asked, well, what is that? And then realize, well, okay, you kind of put it in the essays. Parents look that up. And we forget how little we know, not only about each other, Black and white. I think that our books also started people to thinking about people that we work with and we don't really know, people who, we trust our lives to and our children to, and we don't really know them, well, we don't really know what our teacher, what my child's teacher does, on Sunday. And I think that I hope that this book is a stimulus to all of that, to those conversations that many of us are uncomfortable. We're living in uncomfortable times. We don't know what to say to people. We don't know what's going to send somebody off. We don't know what's going to truly offend somebody. Not this old, everything's culture, cancel culture. Everything is having to be politically correct. No, we're not talking about that. This book talks about simple humanity. Simple humanity. I'm thinking so much about, I think it's Sheila Brooks' essay, who talks very poignantly about all the times that she's rising in the business world, that she's still being treated like the N-word, or she has instances where she has to explain herself. And I think that if we began to understand, this is my feeling, if all of us, but especially non-Black people, began to understand what Black people's lives are, and we do the same thing, I think it brings down the temperature of everything. And we got to bring down the temperature so we can, heat is fine, but we need light. Oh, I'm sorry. What I wanted to tell everyone is that I learned almost everything I learned about writing well and writing in a connected way as a journalist. And I've written 5 novels, but I bring so much of that writing. That's why I asked you about writing every day, or writing as often as you can, because the more you write, the better you are. The more you write, the more you find out your style. There probably, maybe one of you here probably knows really what his or her style is. But the only way you can do that is by writing often. And I also challenge all of you, this is Wanda's purview as well, to think about writing an op-ed page piece for anything from the New York Times down to the Waco, whatever the local paper is. If you're a journalist, I really just, give you a prompt, to get out there and be a journalist and get rejected and write it again and and share it with your teachers, and share it with people who you respect. That the writing thing will get you so far. I press that upon you enough. And it's Wanda just said so much of journalistic writing is formulaic.
Okay.
Yeah, and also I would say that writing never stops. I'm still writing for my local paper. I'm not writing for the big papers anymore, but I write. In fact, Tina doesn't even know this, but I have piece published today. We haven't even had that conversation yet. I just found out last night that it was going to be published today.
I did see it. I know that one.
Oh, okay.
I didn't know when it was going to be published though.
Yeah. Has your class read any of the? It looks like I'm looking at your question. What was your favorite essay in the book? Is that for us or for the?
Yes, these are just some general questions. So are you guys ready to take? Are y'all ready to field questions or?
Yes, I actually want to address the first question because one of my favorite essays in the book, the beginning of it. This is by Regina Bradley, and the title is something in my spirit. And I just want to read the very first part of it because it's really one of my favorite things. It's so enlightening to people. It starts, growing up as a Black girl in the South, I was indoctrinated with the 10 commandments of being ladylike. And when I read this, I thought, oh my gosh, that was my experience. And I think every Black woman, especially in our generation, had the same experience. And so the 10 commandments are, thou shalt smile sweetly at all times. Thou shalt not question the authority of your elders. Thou shalt never have a boyfriend. He shall be your lil friend until at least a decade into marriage. Thou shalt say yes, ma'am, and yes, sir, in response to every question or statement directed at you. Thou shalt love Jesus and only Jesus. Thou shalt not leave the house with a satin hair bonnet on your head. If y'all don't know what that is, just look around. Thou shalt always strive to look pretty. Thou shalt covet book smarts over street smarts. Thou shalt not wear red nail polish or red lipstick. Oops, I think I have on red today. And thou shalt not curse. That's just some advice that we grew up with. It's not always applicable in today's world, but our grandparents and our parents, told us you have to be a lady all the time. And I just love the way.
Strict rules. It wasn't just a suggestion, like you said. Those were the 10 commandments. Being ladylike for Black women meant something different than it did for when we went out in the world, which this essay points to, it was imperative to look your best, because not only you were representing all Black women in the whole world, but also you were representing your parents and the people in your neighborhood and the people in your community. And don't be bringing no shame on us. There's just so much richness in African-American experience that I think, comes through in these essays that will be eye-openers to people. Never thought about it, didn't know it, nobody ever told them.
And this writer, her name is Regina Bradley. She's a professor at Kennesaw State University in Georgia. She was greatly influenced by her grandparents. And so she talked about, some of the things her grandparents taught her. And that doesn't mean that our parents aren't in our lives, but our grandparents were very, very much a part of our lives and helped to keep us in tune with those commandments and the kinds of rules that were set up, the kinds of things. I think this essay is one that says something about you slipping. Was that your introduction, Tina, or was that her?
About what?
Slipping. You slipping.
Oh, slipping. That was my introduction about
your introduction. Those of you who don't know what that means is because we don't wear slips anymore under our dresses, but
we wear most of our this generation wears most of their underwear on top of their clothes.
I know, right? But when we went to college, we wore dresses all the time because Spelman required it of us. And you almost always had on a slip under your dress. And if your slip was longer than your dress, some woman, Black woman, would walk up and just gently tap you on the shoulder or whisper in your ear, "You're slipping," and that just meant you need to go in the restroom and pull up your slip because your underwear is showing. And so those little things that we grew up with, we just wanted, it was important for us for our essays to share some of that wisdom and some of that culture. This really is about culture. And the title of the book, African American Women Write on Race, Culture, and Community. And that culture piece is really, really important to share with a generation of people who may not know what our culture is as women and as African Americans.
Your students will probably know Wiz Khalifa, who is a rapper, and his mother as a matter of fact, has the last essay in the book. Peachy Wenbush put folk, and she is a wonderful writer. She's the kind of writer who writes the way she talks. And that's very difficult to, I know, y'all, you hear something, a storyteller, and you go, oh, that's wonderful, write that down. And they write it down and it's like flat, everybody can't write the way, they talk. But if you write often and submit your work out to get response back, you get better and better and better at it. One of my aims, and I guess I'm sure Wanda's as well, is, I want to be a better writer than I was last year. I want my current book novel to be, breathtaking compared to my last novel. So, you're always aiming to get better. And the only way, it's like practicing the piano or practicing, a 3-point shot. You keep doing it over and over until it's part of you. And that's
See, I'm looking at some of the questions, and I see a question that I'm going to ask you to answer, and that is, where did you get the title Meeting at the Table? Because I think you came up with that part of it.
We had that title before we hung up on that June, but our
very first day.
It absolutely came to me. I absolutely knew that that's what it was going to be. How an idea will come to you like from 3 or 4 different directions. So it came to me in thinking of, okay, we want this to be a straightforward and informative book, but we also wanted to have some gentleness to it. And I think that, one of women's strengths is their gentleness. And so, we wanted to have a sense of inviting people, meeting at the table. I thought that included everybody. I didn't say who was, but we need to have this conversation. I mean, we've been saying this for decades, and the United States of America and our citizens refuse